Okay. Hello, welcome. We are coming to you from Food Truck Tuesdays. This is, I can't really remember if this is week 8 or week 9. I believe it's week 9. We are in front of the Nicholas Conservatory sign. And the reasoning for us being here, the reason that we are here right now is just to spread awareness, to garner community support, and to make sure that these police shootings and these police brutality cases and this police terrorism in the city is well known by each and every one of these community members that come by here. So we're going to talk a little bit about Faust and Great Tigo. We're going to talk about my fault. Let me try to get this ready. We're going to talk about Denzel Duvant. We're going to talk about Jose Gonzalez Jr. But what we're also going to talk about is some new cases, some different cases, not some new old cases that we haven't covered before, just to shed a light on them as well. Because if for some reason Mark Barmore doesn't do it for you, if for some reason Kerry Blake doesn't do it for you, maybe the police murder of Lee Charles Bell, maybe that will do it for you. Maybe the police murder of or the police shooting of Alexander Wassan, maybe that will do it for you. So we're gonna talk about some different shootings, some different cases. And the first one I'm gonna start with, let me just pull it up right here, make sure I got it all right. Hold on, before I do that, let me share this live, and everybody else share this live. Okay, there we go. So the first case I'm gonna talk about is the police murder of Lee Charles Bell. And okay, let me see. Let me make sure I'm pulled up in the right spot. And let me know how the audio sounds. I've never done this before. Let me know how the audio sounds. Never done like this before. Okay. So when we read about or hear about, or there's a police shooting, or there's an in custody death, or there's a case of police brutality in Rockford or in anywhere really, the first thing to remember is the first thing to think of that everybody should have in their mind is the first news story that come out is gonna be full of lies. The first news story that come out is gonna be blatant lies because the people that put it out are in bed with the police, and the people that put it out are invested in telling the lies and garnering community support and making sure that the community is on their sides by telling these lies. So I'm gonna talk about Lee Charles Bell. Lee Charles Bell died on June 9th, 2002, right here in Rockford. He died as a result of actions that took place on May 30th, 2002. The first reports about his death were that Lee Charles Bell accidentally fell while handcuffed and bashed his head onto the concrete. Stephen Pugh, the police chief at the time, Stephen Pugh's position at the time was that the Rockford Police Department officer, Jeffrey Cohen, had made no physical contact after handcuffing Lee Charles Bell. And because Lee Charles Bell died as a result of his head injury and Jeff Cohen was the only witness, police got to paint the picture of how they wanted the story to be. The first story that the police put out was that Cohen had stopped Lee Charles Bell at 3:15 a.m. for questioning about a potential drug or prostitution transaction. Think about that. So they had stopped this man for no real reason, really. They had stopped this young man, or they had stopped this man just to stop him, pretty much. But it's another case of, it's a black man, let me stop him. It's a black man, let me go open and harass him. Especially in 2000. Okay. So then after Jeffrey Cohen had gotten to contact, after Jeffrey Cohen had confronted Lee Charles Bell, he then handcuffed him and told him to sit down. In the Rockford Police Department's narratives, Lee Charles Bell, without any physical contact whatsoever, fell on his own and bashed his head on the concrete. He fell on his own and bashed his head on the concrete. That's their story. That's the story that they put out. But the results of the Winnebago County coroner's autopsy was that the skull fracture was consistent with a push and a shove. And while there weren't any other witnesses to the death of Lee Charles Bell, his family was able to provide more context through suing the city for excessive force causing death. What was uncovered in the lawsuit was that Lee Charles Bell was an informant for the Rockford Police Department, working undercover to buy drugs. In fact, before his death, he was preparing to testify against a Rockford Police Department officer. The family also ordered a second independent autopsy to be done. The conclusion of that autopsy was that Lee Charles Bell's injuries were the result of getting pushed along with getting beaten. Jeffrey Cohn faced no repercussions. The family of Lee Charles Bell received a settlement from the city of Rockford of $28,000. So think about that case just in general in terms that they have an informant, somebody working with the police, working to buy drugs, and he getting ready to testify against one of their co-workers. He getting ready to testify against a Rockford Police Department cop. And I'm not, all I'm going to say is that sounds fishy. I'm not going to get into, make no allegation or nothing like that, but I'm just going to say, if you have somebody who's about to testify against a Rockford Police Department cop, and then that person somehow dies in police custody, that sounds fishy to me. That sounds fishy. That sounds like not everything was clean there. That sounds like not everything is the way they're telling you. And it's important to think of those things when the police shooting comes up, or when an in-custody death comes up. That, let me see. Let me go pull up this next one. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the police shooting of Alexander Wasson. Alexander Wasson, he was a 58-year-old teacher from Hananiga. 58-year-old white teacher from Hananiga. And let me get up the date right. My fault. I should have had this date prepared. I believe it is June 1st. Yeah, June 1st, 2010. Out in Roscoe, I believe. Yes. June 1st, 2010, the Winnebago County Sheriff's deputies responded to a welfare check. They went to do a welfare check at this residence, at Alexander Wasson's residence. Let me get everything ready. And upon responding to the scene, and upon the Winnebago County Sheriff's deputies arriving at the home, they then engaged in a 2-hour standoff with Alexander Wasson. A 2-hour standoff for a welfare check. A 2-hour standoff for a welfare check, a wellness check. People are, this call is to make sure this person is okay. This call is to make sure this person don't need help. This call is to make sure that this person is of the right stable mind, and if he's not of the right stable mind, then that person could get help. That's what a welfare check or a wellness check should be for. So when you go to this wellness check, and instead of offering them help, instead of having people there to assist and help them and care for the safety of life, instead they engage in a 2-hour standoff. A 2-hour standoff with Alexander Wasson. Somebody who they knew needed help. Somebody who they knew was not of a white. My fault. Somebody who they knew might not be of a stable mind at this time. And at the conclusion of the 2-hour standoff, they then engaged and breaking into his home, busting into his home, and they found Alexander Wasson in the basement of his home. And he had a gun at the time. And when the police officers came down, he put the gun down, and the allegations are that he picked up the gun, that they handcuffed him, that they surrounded him, then he somehow picked up the gun in a threatening manner. That caused Pete Del Prado to shoot him. that caused Pete Dowd to shoot him. Think about that. Just in terms of the police shouldn't have even been there. The police shouldn't have even been there. Think about that. By going to this house, by sending police officers to respond to this wellness check, by sending police officers to respond to this welfare check, Alexander Wasson got shot. Alexander Wasson got shot, and he would pass away a month later. He would pass away a month later. Think about if they had sent out therapists to help out for this man. Think about if they had sent out people that cared for the sanctity of life for Alexander Wasson. Think about if he had gotten the help on June 1st, would he have survived? I can guarantee you, if they hadn't sent out therapists and they hadn't engaged in a 2-hour stand, if they had sent out therapists and they hadn't engaged in a 2-hour standoff with Alexander Wasson, that things wouldn't have gone the same. That Alexander Wasson wouldn't have gotten shot. That he would have gotten the help that he needed. Think about at this time the program. The name of the program is escaping me right now, but the program that is ongoing in Denver, Colorado, where they send out therapists to these types of calls. They send out social workers to these types of calls, and people who care for the sanctity of life. And I believe it's over 1,000 times they have been sent out. Over 1,000 times they have been sent out, and not one time they have needed a police officer. Not one time have they called for backup. And this case of Alexander Wasson is tied to the police murder of Logan Bell, and that is tied to the police murder of Kerry Blake, because these are also situations where the police were fully aware at the time that it was a situation where somebody needed help. Too often these folks need help, not the police. And because it is police officers that respond to these scenes, it endangers those lives. Logan Bell's grandmother called the police because she was scared that he might hurt himself. And Jeremiah Cesarli and Philip Stotler and Andre Bratch responded to that scene, and Jeremiah Cesarli and Philip Stotler shot Logan Bell 16 times. It's a young man, it's an 18-year-old child, an 18-year-old boy who needed help, not the police. Same goes for Kerry Blake. Instead of engaging in an hours-long standoff with Kerry Blake, what would have happened if they had responded to the scene with therapists? What if therapists would have responded to the scene? What if social workers had responded to the scene? What if people who were trained in the mental health field and cared for the sanctity of life, what if those people had responded to Kerry Blake on December 30th? What if, I bet you Kerry Blake would still be alive. I guarantee you Kerry Blake would still be alive if they had sent help and not an army. If they had sent help and not a tank right up to his door. So it's important to think about that. We've seen it albeit in a limited sample in Denver, we've seen that we do not need the police to respond to these mental health cases. We do not need the police to respond to wellness checks. We do not need the police in these situations. Okay, I'm gonna pull up one more. I'm gonna pull up another case. I'm all over the place. I'm gonna talk about Jonathan Allen. I'm gonna talk about Jonathan Allen right now. Jonathan Allen was shot at by Randy Burke, who was the current intern police chief. Who was an intern police chief at this time, and I believe the other name, Jason Bailey. Jason Bailey is the other cop's name. And they police officers had pulled up to the street on an unmarked car. They had pulled up to the street, and they had seen Jonathan Allen, who they didn't really know. They didn't know who Jonathan Allen was. Jonathan Allen didn't have no warrants out for him. Jonathan Allen was a known threat, or somebody who had threatened people on this day. Jonathan Allen was a normal citizen on this day. Jonathan Allen, just a regular citizen, just walking down the street, walking in the sidewalk. and Randy Burke and Jason Bailey hopped out of this car, and because Jonathan Allen saw what he believed to be police and what he believed to be police officers, he ran away. My fault. He actually said that he saw men chase him, so he ran away because they were unmarked and because they was in plain clothes. That all he saw was men chase him, so he ran. Even if he knew it was a police, even if it was a police car that had pulled up, it wouldn't. If he had ran, it wouldn't be justification to shoot him. It would not have been justification to shoot him. Somebody running away when police are there, it's not justification to get shot at. How many people have done run away from the police? Ain't nobody want to be where the police are. Ain't nobody want to be where the police are. If it's a party and police come, everybody running. If police drive past, what are you going to do? You're going to let them pass you. If you walking by the police, if the police walking this way on the sidewalk and you walking this way, I'm across the street. I want to be around the police. So him just running is not justification for him getting shot. And part of him running, Randy Burke and Jason Bailey fired up to 8 shots, a total of 8 shots at him. A total of 8 shots in the direction of Jonathan Allen. And luckily, only one hit him in the leg. Only one shot hit him, and I believe it was his lower right leg. Now, it's important to know, again, that is an accident, as in the case of Jose Gonzalez Jr. It's an accident that Jose Gonzalez Jr. is still alive. Reports are that Owen McGinnis shot out Jose Gonzalez Jr. up to 5 times. Up to 5 times he reportedly shot at Jose Gonzalez Jr. All for running away. And again, that is an accident. Owen McGinnis didn't mean for Jose Gonzalez to still be alive. Owen McGinnis shot to kill. Same way Randy Burke shot to kill. Same way Jason Bailey shot to kill. So it is a miracle that Jose Gonzalez Jr. is still alive. It is a miracle that Jonathan Allen survived past this day. Now, let me see. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up just so I can make sure this dollar amount is right. Okay. Oh, that's the wrong part. Okay. But he did not only, the allegations, Jonathan Allen would go on to sue the city and sue, and Jonathan Allen, and Jason Bailey and Randy Burke was named in the lawsuit. And in the lawsuit, part of the lawsuit was not only did Randy Burke and Jason Bailey shoot at him and one of the cops strike him in the lower right leg. Not only did they shoot at him 8 times, not only did one of them actually shoot him, but they then ran up to him and beat him along with 4 other officers. So that's 6 officers on 1 man who had been shot. So that's 2 officers who shot 8 shots at him, and another 4 officers joined in on the beating. Had to get their licks in too. So a man vulnerable shot by the police. They didn't just shoot him. That was enough for them. They got on top of him and started beating him. And the team that Jason Bailey and Randy Burke, the team that they was on at the time, that was a precursor to the Scope team. And if y'all ain't familiar with the Scope team, it was 3 Scope team members that participated in beating this young man half to death. It was a Scope team officer. It's Scope team officers that regularly patrol fairgrounds. It's Scope team officers that regularly patrol concourse. It's Scope team officers that regularly patrol Blackhawk and Auburn Manor. It's Scope team officers that regularly patrol these neighborhoods and regularly engage in car chases. So these cases, when you hear about Denzel Dubon, no, he's not the only one. When you hear about Jose Gonzalez Jr., no, he's not the only one. When you hear about Faustin Gray Tigo being murdered inside his own home, no, he's not the only one. So if for some reason you can look at this face and you don't have empathy for this young man, know that there's hundreds of more incidences like this. If for some reason the video of Faustin Gray Tigo being murdered, that doesn't do it for you, maybe Carrie Blake will do it for you. Maybe Carrie Blake will do it for you. If for some reason Jose Gonzalez Jr. doesn't do it for you, maybe Alexander Wasan will do it for you. Maybe Jonathan Allen will do it for you. Maybe, because I promise you, if you focus on one case and you don't agree anything you think about, for some reason, for some sick reason, you can justify it in your mind, I can tell you it's 50 more. I can tell you it's 60 more. It's hundreds more. It's hundreds more. Think about that. And some of these names of these stories of these people have gotten killed. Maybe Mark Barmer doesn't do it for you. Maybe the fact that he was murdered in front of children, maybe that doesn't do it for you. Or maybe they're murdering Mike Sego, a 16-year-old. Maybe that will do it for you. Maybe Mike Sego don't do it for you. Maybe you like Marie's Pizza, which I don't understand why anybody would like nasty ass Marie's Pizza. Maybe Logan Bell would do it for you. A neurologically diverse 18-year-old whose grandmother called the police because she was scared for his life. Police officers came, shot him 16 times. Think about that. And maybe that don't do it for you. Maybe you don't want to hear about no police shooting. Maybe you don't. You just don't like the way that sounds. You just can't get into it, and you think of them as they probably did something wrong. Maybe Mikey Guzman will do it for you. Maybe that case will do it for you. Maybe the case of a young man who's just walking home from a bar. Maybe the case of somebody just walking home and getting ran over by a South Beloit police officer. Maybe that will do it for you. He couldn't even walk home. Just walking home had his life taken. Just walking home had his life taken. Justified, caught back at work. Justified. Justified, caught back at work. Not missing a paycheck throughout this entire time. Not one. Not one. So, let me see. Let me pull up this other case. My fault. Okay. We working on... I'm going to talk about Donald Cooper. I got some in my eye. Let me talk about Donald Cooper. If you go on Facebook today, or if you would go into any news stories today, you would hear complaints about panhandling. You hear big arguments in the comment sections about panhandling. People complaining about panhandling. Police officers saying they wish they could do something about that. City officials saying they can't do nothing about that. That their hands is tied because a Chicago judge ruled that. What did you call that? The Chicago judge said ruling came out that panhandling was okay. Panhandling isn't a crime. What did you call that? Legalizing or decriminalizing? Decriminalizing? Decriminalized. A Chicago judge was part of a decriminalizing effort of panhandling. Now, while that isn't important, it's because of the life and the death and the murder of Donald Cooper. The murder, the police lynching of Donald Cooper. Donald Cooper was a young man who was panhandling. A young man who was panhandling. And the allegations are that he followed people into the store. The allegations are that he just was asking people for money and asking people for some things, and he followed them into a store. Not that he was aggressive, not that he tried to fight people, not that he got physical or threatened people in any type of way. But at this time, panhandling was an arrestable offense. Panhandling was an arrestable offense at this time. I believe this was 2007, either 2007 or 2006. And police officers, the store clerks, I believe it's like a Walgreens or like a pharmacy store, a drugstore, or something like that. They called the police. They called the police and said it's a panhandle. They described Donald Cooper, and police officers arrived at the scene. Police officers came to the scene. Now, when police officers came to the scene, let me see. Let me make sure I got the cop that did it exactly right. Richard DeValiger. Richard DeValiger was one of the officers that responded to the scene. And again, Donald Cooper ran from the police. Donald Cooper ran. And again, you cannot be sentenced to life in prison for running because you ran from the police. No judge is going to send you to life in prison because you ran from the police. No judge is going to order you to be executed because you ran from the police. So running from the police is not a crime punishable by death. Running from the police is not a crime punishable by life in prison. It's not. But too often, Rockford Police Department officers and police officers across the nation, across the world, have been enacted in these scenarios as if they were judge, jury, and executioner. More than willing to play the part of judge, jury, and executioner. So because Donald Cooper ran, police officers would chase him down. Police officers would try to run after him. And the allegations are that he supposedly reached inside his waistband in a threatening manner. Reached inside his waistband in a threatening manner. What does that even mean? No gun was covered. No weapon was covered of any kind. Think about that. It's just another lie to tell you. It's the way to criminalize Donald Cooper in any way that they can. Reach into your waistband in a threatening manner. There's no witnesses to testify that was actually the case, besides a police story. So Richard DeValiger shot this young man while he was running away. Shot and killed this young man while he was running away. Unarmed. Never posed a threat to nobody. Never was violent with anybody. His only crime that he may have been committed on. His only crime that he may have committed was running. Police murdered him. Police killed him right there. Shot him while running away. So you hear these talks and you hear these complaints and you see these big ass arguments in comment sections about panhandling and police should do something about panhandling. When the police do something about panhandling, police get called. They send people to jail who don't need to be sent to jail, who need help. They send people, and at times they murder people. They murder these people. They murder some of these people. And remember that these are people. These are people. Not some other being or some other lower than self. These are people. Human beings. So next case I'm going to talk about is Shannon Graves. Shannon Graves, I don't believe Shannon Graves is in here. Okay, just had to make sure. Next case I'm going to talk about is Shannon Graves. Shannon Graves is somebody who we have a memorial for, say the name square. What's that intersection called? It's not really an intersection. Or Shannon Graves is? Right at the corner of the old city hall. First and what? First and Chestnut. First at the intersection of First and Chestnut. Right at the corner of the old city hall. And Shannon Graves was murdered. My fault. I'm trying to get this all ordered in the right way. Shannon Graves was murdered by Rockford Police Department officer Brian Prime. And Brian Prine is somebody whose name had came up when this happened. Brian Prine is somebody who, even though he murdered Shannon Graves, even though he tased Shannon Graves 3 times, just like every other case before him, and just like every other case since him, it got ruled justified and he got to go back to work. And this is what he did. This is part of the. He was one of the officers that was named in a police report that was involved in the brutalization of Denzel Duvant. Brian Prine murdered Shannon Graves, and for decades he has done things like this. A justified shooting is sending a dangerous person back into the police force. A justified murder is sending a dangerous person back to the police force. If you was a cop in the 90s and you shot and killed somebody, or if you shot somebody at all, or if you used deadly force at all, the only requirements for you was a 3-day administrative leave. You get a long weekend. If you was a cop in the 90s and you shoot somebody or you murder somebody, you get a long weekend. That's it. You get a 3-day weekend. That's how the system was set up. So Shannon Graves, it was a domestic call, and it was a domestic call. My fault. And Officer Brian Prine, along with other officers, responded to the scene. And again, running from the police is not a crime punishable by death. Running from the police is not a crime punishable by life in prison. Running from the police is not justification to be murdered. Running from the police is not justification to be attempted to be murdered. To have an attempt on your life. But because Shannon Graves ran from the police when the police responded to the scene, he was again chased. And again, police officers were aware of who Shannon Graves was. Police officers were fully aware of what the call was for, and have had previous interaction with Shannon Graves. So it's not a case where they didn't know who he was and they could never find him again. No, they knew exactly who he was. They knew where he lived. They knew everything about him. So it made no sense, logically, logistically, to chase this young man. But Officer Brian Prine, along with other officers, chased him. And Officer Brian Prine fired his taser at Shannon Graves. Fired his taser at him one time. But then, supposedly, and again, there are no witnesses to this. And again, there are no witnesses to this. The allegations are that Shannon Graves continued to struggle. So after Brian Prine tased Shannon Graves one time, he then tased him again. So that's twice now. This young man has been tased. That's twice now. And again, the allegations are that Shannon Graves somehow, despite being tased twice, somehow he continued to struggle. So Officer Brian Prine fired his taser again at Shannon Graves. So that's 3 times now. That's 3 times that this young man has been tasered. Not convicted of any crime. My fault, excuse me. Not convicted of any crime. Not sentenced, not a guilty verdict or anything. Didn't get the right to stay in trial or anything. They just tased him 3 times. And it's something that has happened. Something that happened on a national level, but has also happened on a local level and worldwide, really, is that if you died in police custody, or if you were tased to death, that the police will put out a story saying that you died of adverse effects of cocaine. Or like when George Floyd, they said he died because of adverse effects of fentanyl. All to get away from the fact that it's blood on Brian Prine's hand. He murdered somebody. You don't tase somebody 3 times and hope that they live. You don't tase somebody 3 times and think that they might survive. You tase somebody 3 times to murder somebody. You tasing somebody 3 times because you no longer care about this young man's life. So it was no surprise when the Rockford Police Department put out a story saying that Shannon Graves died of adverse effects of cocaine. No, Shannon Graves died because Brian Prine tased him 3 times. That's why Shannon Graves died. Shannon Graves was murdered. Shannon Graves was murdered. This was a police lynching. And because Brian Prine got to go back to work, a decade later, he participated in the brutal nature of this young man. He participated in the brutalization of this young man. Was one of the up to 7 cops that participated in the brutalization of this young man. Brian Prine got to go back to work. Brian Prine got to go back to work. Let me pull up this next case, because the next case is connected with Shannon Graves. So Shannon Graves died on June 25th, 2008. Was tased to death. On August 10th, it's a little over, maybe like a month and a half, you say a month and a half. On August 10th, Cathedral Hines also died as a result of being tased to death. Let me see. Let me pull up, make sure I got the story all the way right. Oh no, that's an M. Oh, well, that's gonna take a second. Okay, we're just gonna keep going. So, something to think about, and something to message of importance is that. Hold on, let me fall. My fault. I'm all discombobulated. Okay. Okay, here we go. And at the time, Chet Epperson was the police chief. And Chet Epperson came out and put out a story that said the Rockford Police Department only used force 1% of the time. On 1% of the calls, they use force. Now, if you was to think about that, first of all, Chet Epperson a known liar. Chet Epperson a repeat liar. Chet Epperson, one of the biggest liars Rockford ever had. As is all police officers, as is all police chiefs, as is each politician that has came from Rockford. So, saying that police officers only use force 1% of the time, I believe, and it's my belief, that is a lie. But if you was to take Chet Epperson at his word, if he was to believe Chet Epperson and believe his every word, that 1% of the time would equate to over 1,000 cases. Over 1,000 times Rockford police officers use force each year. Over 1,000 times. Over 1,000 times. So that raises the question is, how many people have been tased by the Rockford Police Department when they shouldn't have been tased? How many people have been beat to a point where they damn near look like this? How many people? If they use force 1,000 times, supposedly, allegedly, over 1,000 times per year, how many people have their face beat like this? How many people's bodies have beat like this? How many people have been tased? How many people have been punched, kicked, slammed to the ground? How many people have been yanked out of cars, slammed on the ground? I've seen multiple times, police officers, 4 or 5 officers go after one person, throw him to the ground. It's a police officer on every limb and one on his head. It's a police officer on every limb and one sitting on the young man's head. I've seen police officers yank people out of cars, yank them down, yank them out, sit on his head, and on each of his limbs. How many people have been like this? How many people have been beat like this? My fault. Okay. But we're gonna keep going. We're just gonna keep going. We're to read about. Damn, bugs out here. A lot of bugs out here. Okay, we're gonna read about another case. Okay, let me fall. My fault. I should have had this pulled up already. Okay, let me see. We're gonna read about Mike Dowkey's case. We're gonna read about Mike Dowkey's case. There was a man, a young man at the time, who was at McDonald's. He was at a McDonald's, and he was having a seizure. He was having a seizure, and never had a seizure in his life before, but he's having a seizure on this day. And paramedics was called. People at McDonald's, they called the paramedic, called 911. Paramedics was the first ones to respond, and they was offering him care while he was still experiencing the seizure. Now, again, paramedics responded to the scene first. Paramedics was on the scene first, and paramedics was offering care to this young man. Now, when Mike Dowkey arrived at the scene, again, he was aware that it was a case where it was a man that was seizing. It was aware of the fact that it was a case where a man was having a medical issue. But Mike Dowkey approached the scene. Then somehow the allegations are that Tom Klinicki, the young man who was experiencing a seizure, somehow need Mike Dowkey in the groin region. Now again, this is the call was made because the young man was having a seizure. This is a call that was made, and paramedics were surrounding him, surrounding Tom Klinicki, trying to care for him while he's experiencing the seizure. But Mike Dowkey come up, and the only thing he know is force. The only thing he know is violence. The only thing he know is violence. Again, the only thing he knows is violence. So when the allegations are that Tom Klinicki, who is experiencing a seizure, somehow need this man or kick this man, kick or need Mike Dowkey in the groin region, I would think my first thought was that's just an effect of the seizure. But Mike Dowkey, because he only knows violence, he took it as a disrespect to him, and he began to punch Tom Klinicki in the stomach. Think about that. He is an assistant deputy chief right now. He responded to a scene where he was aware of a young man who was having a seizure. He saw and witnessed paramedics surround this man and offer him care, but he only knows violence. Paramedics had the scene well in hand, was giving him the type of care that he needed. But you send a police officer to this scene, and now somebody been beat by the police. You send police officer to the scene, and now his life is in danger. Now Tom Klinicki's life is in danger because there's police officers there who they only thought their first, second, third, fourth, fifth thought is violence. That's all that's on their mind. That's all they know how to do. Violence. Brutality. Beat people. They're not doing exactly what you want, beat them. They are doing what you want, beat them. So that's just one case of thousands per year of a situation where force is used. Thousands. That's just one example of somebody having a seizure. Police officers responding to the scene, or somebody having a seizure and beating on this young man for having a seizure. Okay. So we can pull up. Okay. We can talk about this. A fact that don't get talked about enough, and rightfully so. Not rightfully so. It's a small part of what police officers do. But police officers regularly shoot and kill animals. Shoot and kill dogs, pets. I was reading about a story from the mid 2000s, where police officers here in Winnebago County, in the span of a week and a half, has shot and killed 3 dogs. And that makes me think about Mark Anthony Barmore, and that makes me think about Oda Poole, who's currently running for Boone County Sheriff. And knowing that he is somebody who has shot and murdered people, knowing that he has shot at people, knowing that he has shot people, knowing that he has shot and killed animals, he has shot and murdered dogs. But now he thinks he can run for Boone County Sheriff. Then that is because a system of impunity, a culture of impunity that is pervasive throughout police departments across the nation and here in Rockford, and Boone County, in Winnebago County. Okay. So we're going to I'm going to talk about Mark Barmore. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Mark Barmore. A call was made on August 24th for a woman has said that Mark Barmore allegedly threatened to slit her throat. That was the allegation. So police officers responded and came to the house, and Mark Barmore was asleep during this time. But by the time the police officers responded to the scene, Mark Barmore wasn't there no more. Mark Barmore had left the house. And the police officers who responded to the scene, they radioed everybody. They got on their radio and they gave a description of Mark Anthony Barmore. So it is then that police officers in Rockford, they're aware on this day to be on the lookout for Mark Barmore. And officers Oda Poole and Stan North, they then saw Mark Anthony Barmore standing outside a church, talking to people, not running, not being violent, just standing outside of a church and talking to people, having conversations with some church members, and part of the conversation is he's telling them the events that took place earlier on in the day, and the church members are telling him to get more involved in the church. The church members are telling him to join the boxing club, to be a part to take more of a hand in the community. But officers Oda Poole and Stan North, that after seeing Mark Anthony Barmore, because they only know violence, because they only know brutality, because their only thoughts is how to enact and how to enforce violence, they ran up on Mark Anthony Barmore. So what did Mark Anthony Barmore do? He ran inside the church, a place where he thought he would be safe. A church. It's a church. A place he thought he would be safe. Now, some of the church members and the churchgoers, they didn't think that the police officers would go down to that basement and murder Mark Barmore. That wasn't their thoughts. They wasn't trying to endanger Mark Anthony Barmore's life. They thought the police officers would do what they say they do: protect and serve. So it was the church members that told the police officers that Mark Anthony Barmore was in the basement of the church, that Mark Anthony Barmore had went into the basement. And again, that's not because they thought that the police officers would go down there and murder him. They just thought that the police officers protect and serve. But that's not what Oda Poole and Stan North would do. Now the allegations are that Mark Barmore got into some type of chase, got into some type of physical confrontation with Oda Poole and Stan North. And it was a fight over the gun. It was a struggle over the gun. But what members of the daycare would say was that Mark Anthony Barmore was in the boiler room. That is a known fact. Mark Anthony Barmore had ran inside and went into the boiler room in the basement of the church. And the officers, Odapool and Sand North, would run down into the basement, and they went into that daycare with their guns drawn already. A place they knew was children. A place they were fully aware that this was an active daycare at this time. That there's a dozen kids in this room. Guns drawn already. Look it. Guns drawn. Now what the teachers at that daycare would say was that Mark Anthony Barnbird was in this boiler room, and that he would then walk out of the boiler room like this. Hands up. That Mark Anthony Barmore walked out of that boiler room like this. Well, that didn't stop officers Odapool and Sand North from shooting him and murdering him. And not all that bullets hit Mark Anthony Barmore. One of the teachers would say that she saw a bullet hit pipe and bounce off and ricochet in a daycare in the basement of a church. In the basement of a church and a daycare in front of over a dozen kids. In front of over a dozen kids. Murdered him in front of children. Now, this is the type of thing that so many detractors say when we're at City Market, or a lot of detractors said at 4th of July, oh, it's kids here, it's kids here, be quiet, it's kids here, go somewhere else, it's kids here, my kids are here. They murdered Mark Anthony Barmore in front of children. In front of children in a daycare. If y'all care about kids so much, where's your empathy for Mark Anthony Barmore? Where's your empathy for the kids who had to witness a young man be murdered with his hands up? Where's your empathy for the children, for the toddlers who had to witness a man be killed at the hands of the police? Next, I'm going to talk about Mike Sago. Again, to all those people who say, oh, it's kids here. Be quiet, my kids gonna hear this. Mike Sago was 16. Mike Sago was a 16-year-old child. 16 years old. How old are you what grade are you in? You were sophomore. You were sophomore when you were 16. You were sophomore in high school. Mike Sago and Brandon Sago and Lamar Coates and Desmond Bellman were a part of an armed robbery attempt at Marie's Pizza. The allegations are that Lamar Coates was the only one with the gun. That's true. That's fact. Lamar Coates was the only one with the gun. And the allegations are that Lamar Coates went into Marie's Pizza first. And at this time, at Marie's Pizza, the manager of the store was there. Tarara was there. But also a cook was there. And a delivery driver was there. But the most important person that was there was Frank Pobjecki. Now, the reasoning for why Frank Pobjecki has changed throughout the years. During the trial, Marilyn Hyde Ross would say that, oh, he was just a normal customer. He was just waiting on his pizza for his family. Just passing by, just waiting on his pizza. But earlier reports would say, before the trial, would say that Earlier reports would say that Frank Pobjecki was really good friends with Tarara. And that they was in the back, in the break room, watching a boxing fight, along with the cook and the delivery driver. Okay. So now the allegations are that when Lamar Coates went into the Maries, the first allegations that Pobjecki and Tarara tried to point out was that Tarara supposedly pointed the gun at Tarara when he came out the break room and told him to give him his money. Give me your money. Now, Lamar Coates and his attorneys would say that he never said that he never got the chance to speak. Now, when Tawara came out that break room and he saw a gun, he went after it. Went after the gun, and that led to a physical confrontation over the gun. And then Frank Pobjecki would come out. My fault, I should have mentioned this before. Tawara would carry a gun at his hip at all times. At all times, he would carry a gun at his hip. And that's important to know. So while Frank Pobjecki and Lamar Coates got into this physical confrontation, physical struggle over the gun, Frank Pobjecki then comes out and joins the struggle. And Frank Pobjecki is reaching for the gun at Tawara's hip. He's reaching for the gun, trying to get it. Now, the delivery driver would also get into the fight. And he would punch some of the people and be physical with some of the people. And Desmond Bailman would get involved in the fight. And Brandon Sego would get involved in the fight as well. And Frank Pobjecki, my fault. Frank Pobjecki would end up being able to get a hold of the gun at Tawara's hip. And Lamar Coates would lose his fight with Tawara, and Tawara would have the gun. So now at this point, Lamar Coates is unarmed. At this point, Brandon Sego is unarmed. At this point, Desmond Bailman is unarmed. At this point, Mike Sego is unarmed. And in fact, Mike Sego never even left the door. Mike Sego was a lookout. Never joined in any struggle. Never joined in any fight over a gun. Never reached for a gun. Never had a gun at any point. But now at this time, it's 4 people who are unarmed, and Tawara has a gun, and Frank Pobjecki has a gun. And Frank Pobjecki would then go on to shoot Lamar Coates in the throat. Shoot him in the throat. And then Frank Pobjecki would go on to shoot Brandon Sego in the back. Lamar Coates was unarmed. Brandon Sego was unarmed. Frank Pobjecki would shoot Desmond Bailman in the lower half of his body. Desmond Bailman was unarmed. So after shooting these 3 people, it was one more. After shooting these 3 people, there was just one more person who hasn't been shot. And that was 16-year-old Lil Mike Sego, who stood by the door the entire time. Ducked for cover. He on the ground, crawling away. You can see there's video of this 16-year-old crawling out the door of Marie's Pizza. Crawling out the door on his stomach, crawling out the door. Frank Pobjecki shot him 3 times in the back. Frank Pobjecki shot the 16-year-old boy 3 times in the back while he crawling away. He not even running. He crawling away. This is a mass murder. This is a mass shooting. This is a mass shooting. Mass shooting at Marie's. 4 people got shot. It's a mass shooting at Marie's. 4 unarmed people got shot at Marie's. It's a mass shooting. Frank Pobjecki, a mass shooter. Now what would happen as a result and the consequences of this mass shooting, the consequences of these police murder and 3 attempts of murder, was that Brandon Sego would go to jail for the death of Mike Sego. Brandon Sego is in jail right now because his little cousin got murdered by the police. Because it was a felony act and somebody died as a result of committing a felony. So now Brandon Sego doing 40 years. Brandon Sego doing 40 years for the death of his little cousin. Because he got shot while he was crawling away. Because he got murdered while he was crawling away. Lamar Coates is doing 40 years in prison right now. Because his little brother got murdered by the police. Lamar Coates is doing 40 years in prison because he got shot in the throat. And his little brother got, and his little cousin got shot in the back. And his little brother got shot 3 times in the back while crawling away. Desmond Bellman is doing decades in prison because Mike Sago was murdered. Frank Popjecki back at work. Frank Popjecki, a Winnebago County Sheriff's Deputy to this day. Frank Popjecki trying to run for office. He tried to run for Rockford Township this year. He lost. Tried to run for sheriff in the past. He lost. People in prison right now because Frank Popjecki, a mass shooter. People in prison right now because Frank Popjecki shot at 4 people that was unarmed. People in prison right now because Frank Popjecki murdered a 16-year-old boy as he was crawling away. But Frank Popjecki at work didn't miss a paycheck that entire time. So next I'm going to talk to you about is Philip Johnson. The allegations are that there was a report of shots fired at the San Jose nightclub. There was a report of shots fired and that there was supposed to be a large brawl in the parking lot of San Jose. So police were called, and police were told the car had fled. Now think about that. They were told a car fled from there was supposedly a shooting at this place and a large brawl. If there's a shooting at some place and there's a big ass fight, I'm dipping. I'm leaving. If there's a shooting somewhere and there's a mass fight, I'm leaving. I'm trying to get low. I'm trying to get out of there, make sure I'm safe, make sure the people I'm with are safe. So just the fact of the allegation that a car fled, the allegation that a car fled from a shooting, a mass shooting at a nightclub, I wouldn't be surprised if everybody there fled. Everybody there should have fled for their own safety. Now on the night, in the early morning hours, this happened in the early morning hours, a car got pulled over. Car got pulled over, pulled inside a parking lot. They did everything right. Now the allegations are, my fault, I should say this first. Important note, this was a 2-door car. 2 doors to this car. Now, what would happen was, what the police would say would happen was that they had approached the car, they had to talk to the driver, approach the driver's side of the car, and they engaged in a conversation with the driver. And supposedly, from the back seat of this car, Philip Johnson supposedly put the car in reverse and ran the car into the police car behind it. Philip Johnson did this from the back seat. Next time you get in your car, next time you go to drive, I want you to get in the back seat and try to put that car in reverse and drive it at a high rate of speed. From the back seat, put your car in reverse and drive it. Ram it into, try it. I bet you can't do it. I bet you it's impossible to do it. From the back seat of this car. Now what would happen, what witnesses would say, or what come up later, was that never happened at all. What happened in fact was the driver did get out of the car. The passenger did get out the car. Now keep in mind again, this is a 2-door car. This is a 2-door car. Now if any of y'all have ever been in a 2-door car, then you are fully aware that in order to get out of a 2-door car from the back seat, you gotta push a lever. You gotta push a lever. And that will follow the front seat, and then you'll be able to get out the car. Then you'll be able to get out the car. Now, witnesses would say, people that was there would say, that is all Philip Johnson did. The driver got out, the passenger got out. Okay, now Philip Johnson, go to get out the car too. And Amado Soria shot him 2 times in the chest. Killing him. Murdering him. This is what happens when it's police officers here whose first, second, third, fourth, fifth thoughts is violence. Their only thoughts is violence. They only thinking about how to enact violence. They feeding for violence. They murdered this man. But that wasn't. They didn't just murder this man. They didn't just shoot this man. What has happened in so many police, not just police shootings, but shootings in general, is that police officers there are slow, extremely slow, to get medical help for the person shot, which has at times, due to the slowness, due to the negligence, has led to people bleeding out. Who's to say that if Philip Johnson had gotten the care that he needed immediately, who's to say that he wouldn't be alive? Same with other shootings in general. Police officers just let the person lie there while they're bleeding out. With Boston Great Tigo, the first thing police officers did after they shot him 11 times and after they tased him, the first thing they did was handcuff him. The first thing they did was handcuff him and call for medical help. Not for Boston Great Tigo, but for Joseph Brulard, who somehow got knocked unconscious during the struggle, during the shooting. Think about that. Police officers called for medical help, not for Boston Great Tigo. They called for help for Joseph Brulard. Okay. I'm going to talk about Logan Bell. And again, it was important to know, as we talked about earlier, we covered it a little bit earlier, what's going on in Denver, it's a revolutionary thing. It is evidence that we do not need the police to respond to these situations. It's a small sample size of why we do not need the police to respond to these issues of mental health, to respond to these things. Logan Bell was 18 years old and was struggling through some mental health issues, had been struggling through some mental health issues. And up to this point, he hadn't been taking the medication that was prescribed to him. So on this day, Logan Bell's grandmother would call the police for help. That was the only alternative. There was no alternative. My fault. That's what I meant to say. There was no alternative. Logan Bell's grandmother called the police because she needed help. She was scared for Logan Bell's life. She was scared for her grandchild. She was scared that he might be a danger to himself. She was scared that he was suffering through mental health issues and he might somehow accidentally hurt himself. She feared for her grandson's life. So when officers Jeremiah Cesarli, Andre Brass, and Philip Sattler responded to this scene, they had no care for his life. They had no care for his grandmother's concerns. They did nothing to alleviate her fears. Instead, what would happen is Logan Bell would see the police, and again, in an agitated state, in a state where he needed mental health help, in a place where he needed help, not the police, he ran. And at the time, he had a BB gun with him. And he ran out, and he's in the field now. And police officers would chase him. Again, this is a man, not my fault. This is a child. This is a boy, an 18-year-old child, whose grandmother called the police because she feared for his life. Police officers chased him. He had a BB gun. They knew it was a BB gun. His grandmother told them over the phone. And the allegations are, and again, this is what happens when the only witnesses are Jeremiah Cesarli and Philip Sattler and Andre Brass. The allegations are that Logan Bell allegedly shot the BB gun in the direction of Andre Brass. I don't never say it hit him. I don't never say anything like that. And first of all, they was fully aware that it was a BB gun. Full knowledge that it was a BB gun. And it don't say that it hit Andre Brass. It say that Andre Brass stumbled and tripped. And in response, the police officers, Jeremiah Cesarli and Philip Salu, their response was to shoot and murder and execute Logan Bell. They shot this 18-year-old boy whose grandmother called the police for help. They shot him 16 times. They shot and murdered this young man 16 times. Shot at him over a dozen times. Walked up to his body. Shot him again. That's a lynching. That's an execution. That's a murder. They murdered this young man who needed help. Needed help, not the police. He needed help, not the police. Because police officers arrived to the scene, and because, again, their only thoughts is violence, 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 Logan Bell not alive today. Rest in power, Logan Bell. Okay. We're gonna do one more. We're gonna do one more. Yeah, we're just gonna do Kobe Carey Blake. Okay. We're just gonna talk about Gina Washington and Joseph McCormick. Joseph McCormick died on December 1st, 2019, and Gina Washington died on October 28th, 2019. So Joseph McCormick died a little over a month after Gina Washington died. And he died inside the Winnebago County Jail. And again, if you know somebody who has ever been to jail, if you know somebody who, or if you personally have ever been to jail, then you are fully aware of the horrendous conditions inside that jail. You are fully aware of the cruel and unusual conditions inside the jail. Now, I would say it's still unclear the actual cause of death for Gina Washington. The family of Gina Washington, during the investigation into his death, received little to no answers. They learned everything just as if you and I would learn everything, just through newspaper articles and news stories and news coverage of it. No transparency from the Winnebago-Boone County Integrity Task Force. No pieces of information from the task force. Nothing. Silence on their end. Silence. And they would say that he died of sleep apnea. That's the allegation. That's what they say. That Gina Washington died of sleep apnea. And again, the family received little to no transparency throughout that process. Little to no answers about that process. Then a little over a month later, Joseph McCormick died inside the Winnebago County Jail. And they ruled it a suicide. And Joseph McCormick's father has to go through the same things that Gina Washington family is going through. The little to no transparency from the Winnebago-Boone County Integrity Task Force. The little to no answers. Joseph McCormick's father would say that his son was not suicidal. That the last thing that Joseph McCormick said to him was, "I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'll see you in the morning." He said his son sounded happy, excited to talk to him tomorrow. But little to no transparency. Little to no answers. No type of key piece of information. There's more death, and more deaths will justify it. Justified, justified, justified. So we're gonna end this live. We're gonna end this live. We're gonna still be here for a period of time, and we're gonna continue to be here every Tuesday. We're gonna continue to be at City Market on Friday, and I'm gonna say this now, so I'm gonna hold myself to it. There's gonna be a newsletter coming out next week, and we're working on a new pamphlet. New pamphlet should be done pretty soon. All right, this is, I believe, week 8. So we're gonna end this live, and we're gonna be here for a little bit, and we're gonna be here next week. Be there on Friday.